How about COVID-19?
Oh yes, that's another variable that seriously disrupted the supply chains in our economy and undermined most of the efforts to attain NDS1. And would appreciate one of the challenges with macroeconomic planning is that there are always trade-offs, unforeseen at times, but there are always policy trade-offs. The moment you try to fight inflation, for example, it can come at the expense of other sectors that would feel then they've been deprived. But that's the nature of macroeconomic policy planning. Dynamics is policy trade-offs that then may be misconstrued as failure of a program, but well, it is how the system is structured.
Now maybe let's take a look at the fact that we are almost midway or close to the end. 2025 is when we should have implemented all of the pillars that we had assumed at the beginning of the NDS1 season. What are some of the things that you feel the government needs to look at from a policy standpoint? What adjustments need to come into place, and what reevaluations are necessary?
Well, that's a very, very good question, given that we are now midway into the completion of NDS1. One of the core pillars of NDS1 is sound corporate governance. And it is one pillar that really holds in place all other pillars. So I feel a greater effort in ensuring sounder corporate governance, not only corporate governance, just sound governance as a whole is imperative. Also, we expect that our monetary and our fiscal policies would be more in tandem than competitive. Yes, because we have seen, of course, there's been a recent divergence towards an agreement, a consensus between the two policies. And we assume, we hope that there is going to be a continued consensus and a conversion towards a common consensus between the two policies. Thirdly, we expect that, well, our public re-engagement is critical. Re-engagement with our multinational, multilateral institutions. Inevitably, we can't rely on our domestic resources alone for us to attain that vision. So re-engagement is also expected to improve in line with the pillars of NDS1, because re-engagement is part of those pillars. We expect that there'll be an increased effort, either to seek new partners or to renegotiate with the existing partners so that we can see an influx of foreign direct investments, because infrastructure development is a high capital expenditure endeavor. Yes, so it needs a greater influx of income into our country so that we can fulfill those within time.
You know, when you talk about governance,
yes,
what comes to mind for me is resources.
Yes.
Resource allocation and how we're expending them. But when we look at Zimbabwe, what is our competitive advantage in the region and globally?
Well, primarily, I would call it a comparative advantage, because that's what we tend to produce at low cost. It's in agriculture, and mining to some extent still gives us a comparative advantage over other countries in the region. And we also have, we are still trying to develop new comparative advantage areas through value addition. But primarily, we know that agriculture is our comparative advantage. We have plenty of land that we are endowed with. We have plenty of minerals that we are endowed with. And with the recent improvements in ICT, it has actually improved our comparative advantage. And competitive advantage comes in perhaps our surplus endowment of natural resources. We also have tourism as well. It boosts, it gives us a competitive advantage over other neighboring countries.
Yes.
The key is now, how do we optimize that? And also, how do we then ensure that in the process of improving those sectors, there is creation of shared value between the government and the society in which these corporates are operating in? Because we expect that that infrastructure should have a spillover effect onto the communities to improve their well-being. So Also, I must add that we expect that the government will emphasize the creation of a shared value as we delve into infrastructure development. Let it not be a jobless growth. Let it also have a positive spillover on to the immediate communities within which these projects are undertaken.
If the elections were a litmus test and our political maturity as an indicator of where we are as a nation, what can we do to commercialize the peace? There's clearly peace in this country. Yes. Can it be sold as something that will invite or improve our interaction with the world?
Oh, definitely. You believe that part of the conditionalities that multilateral institutions put in place before they can extend a helping hand or aid unto any country is the observation and the maintenance of democratic processes. Now, having displayed a peaceful electoral process, it also gives them a sense of security, because that is key to attracting investors. And it also sells the culture in Zimbabwe, a culture of peace. And a culture of peace is a very fertile ground for attraction of foreign direct investment and private players to invest more of their properties into our economy.
Do you feel Zimbabwe has adequately suited policies for investors to come in?
In principle, yes.
How about in implementation?
In implementation, we are not yet there in terms of where we are targeting.
Where are we falling short?
We're falling short perhaps on the issue of governance. We're falling short in terms of our ICT infrastructure. We're still migrating. You would find that the greater part of our economy is still digitally migrating. We are not yet digital immigrants, right? So the moment we become digital habitants, our ease of doing business will also improve, because you'd find that ICT infrastructure enables a much more efficient and effective way of doing business, because it improves connectivity right across different sectors. And that is the oil that we need to stimulate the faster growth and economic development. So we still need to invest more in terms of ICT infrastructure and improvement of our governance. Yes, I think with those in place here.
Stevenson Dlamini, as we maybe can also make note of the effects of migration, with a lot of Zimbabweans leaving the country to the diaspora and, them resorting to, seek greener pastures in various places. What do you foresee as the effect of this on the young people, the youth, their engagement in the economy, and the overall hitback of all of this?
Well, when you look at that, when you look at migration, it reflects on the labor market. Its impact is immediately felt in the labor market, because we are producing skilled labor, which we are exporting without the direct benefit for our country. Although I do believe government is working on a policy to ensure that we can commercialize the exportation of labor, but currently, as a nation, we're not gaining much. And the implications of the high levels of migration also undermine the productivity that we find in the economy, because these are trained, these are experienced personnel that are leaving the country. These are personnel with corporate memory and institutional memory.
Yes.
That is very critical in ensuring that productivity levels are higher, and productivity levels are very key if we also look at the attainment of NDS1 when it comes to human development. If we are investing in human development that will eventually leave, then that's a leaking bucket system, which undermines the economic growth. But it also is a sign that we need to invest more in job creation. We need to invest more, as goes in line with our Vision 2030, which creates an upper middle income economy. So we are lagging behind in catching up with increasing the levels of income to at least be almost at par with the regional averages so that we reduce the migration levels and the brain drain that is associated.
Do you think there's anything that the government could do to maybe make Zimbabwe attractive to the people that are already in the diaspora and have them come back to serve the nation?
Well, I think there are some policies that are already in place that encourage diaspora remittances. I think there's still room to create incentives, even if they don't come back directly, but their remittances are very key because especially at a time where we have less access to multilateral lending, you'd find that diaspora remittances are a very significant factor, especially in providing even social protection for the general households. So I think there are incentives that are still in place, and the government hasn't put restrictive measures in terms of the ease of remitting money into the country. I think there is still room, of course, for creating incentives and maybe designating certain sectors where they have tax exemptions as diasporians when they come to invest in those sectors, be it in the construction industry, infrastructure development. They can be incentivized in terms of taxes because we've seen tax incentives being given to multinational companies. I think if we could extend similar incentives even to diaspora conglomerates that come in to invest in our country, we'll definitely see a better participation and more economic patriotism.
Do you see a better Zimbabwe in the next few years? Are you hopeful?
Well, I am hopeful for a better Zimbabwe because the loss of hope is the death of man.
I think an important demographic for us to also discuss is young people, women and children.
Yes.
What do you think is the way forward for them in terms of political engagement, involvement in policy making, and of course economic activity?
Well, we can start it from political participation. The starting point, I would say, is the education of the youth in terms of the imperative of being actively involved in the political processes. Women, I believe they've displayed more and much better participation of late in terms of voting, but we still need them in the offices as well. We still need more women to participate in that by creating opportunities. Because when we look at that participation, we're not looking at equality. We're looking at equity.
Okay.
So we need to create opportunities for the youth and the women to find space also.
I think that is necessary. Women and children should find space. Women and children should be involved. And I think they're a good assessment of where we are as a nation. We must now take a break, after which we'll be giving you more programming. Be sure to stay tuned. And Zimbabwe is again open for business, and you should be part of that conversation. Special thank you to Stevenson Dlamini, who has given us his time and great insight on various stories. My name is Sibgen Maposa. Stay tuned.
2023, Zimbabwe decides.